Welcome to The Most Important Thing. I'm Danielle DeMarco Neufeld.
And I'm Greg Neufeld, and together we're exploring how ambitious, busy families can build culture at home.
Because after all, family is the most important thing.
Hey, happy Monday.
Happy Monday, Goosey. How are you?
Doing pretty well, pretty well. I'm excited about this video format because you actually come into our home.
Yeah, like the least decorated part of our home, but got to start somewhere.
We're still living in somewhat COVID times, I think, so we need reason to do a little sprucing up around here as it pertains to this office and maybe some new clothes.
That's right. Yeah, always a work in progress.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the 6th episode in our series on the Wholehearted Parenting Manifesto. The hits just keep on coming.
That's right.
This one is on accountability and respect, among other things. From the Wholehearted Parenting Manifesto, Brene says, "You will learn accountability and respect by watching me make mistakes and make amends, and by watching how I ask for what I need and talk about how I feel." So there's a lot to unpack in this one sentence, right? I think we should probably start from the top. Accountability and respect. Respect is a really loaded word for me, I have to tell you.
Say more.
It feels very boomer.
Mm.
I've heard my parents talk about respect from their grandchildren. I certainly grew up with this idea of respecting your elders and respecting your parents, and it usually meant obedience more than anything else. I honestly think about a Catholic school nun with a ruler when I think about respect. But then on the other hand, one of the pillars in our children's very gentle, whimsical preschool is respect for the individual. So I suppose it can play both ways. I personally, however, it's a little bit of a trigger word for me.
Okay.
Accountability, on the other hand, is a word I love. I love the idea of, I guess I think about my career, and I think about getting things done and deliverables and shared accountability and individual accountability on teams. And it's something that I am eager to bring more visible accountability into our home.
So what shows up for you in combining these two? Does it mean that you don't want to talk about respect in the traditional sense, or do you think that maybe it's just not properly defined and we should redefine it?
Yeah, well, so I dug into some of the research on this, and what Brene Brown says is that accountability breeds trust, and trust breeds respect. So when I think about the kind of more positive connotation of respect, as I mentioned from the kids' preschool, respect for the individual, it's a way of saying, I see you, and I'm going to make space for you. And in this particular context, it's about holding myself accountable for the way that my actions may have had an impact on you, positive or negative, even if my intentions were different.
Yeah, you've brought that up recently as being the thing that you want our kids to really understand about repair, is that no matter what they meant, that they kind of do have a place and a role in how someone else feels and what they take away from that experience and interaction.
That's right. I think I've been trying to talk to the kids about how, regardless of your intention, the impact is the same, and you have to be responsible for the impact.
So do you think that it's developmentally appropriate for a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old to be able to actually hold on to that and understand that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that it's aspirational, but I do believe that we can give them the language and help them create a framework so that they can grow into it.
So are we trying to model anything in particular here? Like what's the objective?
Yeah, so I would say that the biggest objective for me, the thing that I wish that I knew earlier in life, is this idea that regardless of what my intention was, I need to be accountable for the impact that my behavior has on you. So I think for many years I thought, well, I didn't mean it like that, or that's just how my brain works, or I would never, this is a big one, like I would never feel this way in that circumstance. So why would you, right? And I think a lot of the learning that I've had over the past, really since becoming a Brene Brown fan, is that my part is to get curious and to witness the way that something I did, or even something, even if I'm just listening to a friend in the way that they have experienced something, that my part is really to hear them, not put my own tape over it. Oh, in this circumstance, I would have felt X. So let me get more specific because it seems pretty nebulous right now. So I think a great example for me that's come up over the past decade repeatedly is pregnancy. and how some friends have had trouble getting pregnant. Some friends have had trouble with the newborn phase or with breastfeeding or with the birth itself. And rarely did those coincide with my struggles. But I know that when Jade was born, her birth was deeply traumatizing to me. And what I needed at that time was for people in my life to hear me and understand how I felt, that regardless of whether or not I had a healthy baby and a healthy mama, which is what was repeated to me ad nauseum, that I felt deeply lost and in a lot of pain. And I needed people to see me for that experience, regardless of whether or not they would have felt the same way. And so that lesson really, that experience, because I had some friends who said to me, "Oh, it's fine. You didn't, the baby's fine. You're fine. It's okay. Like, I know way worse birth stories," right? That's not helpful. What's helpful is people honoring one another's experience and recognizing that, no, I may not have had that same reaction in this, had this happened to me, but I can accept and I can support and empathize with you going through this hardship. And I think that, birth stories aside, this comes up all the time when we hurt each other. And
Yeah. So let's play that back. So a friend says to you, but the baby's healthy, right? And you say, yeah, but that's not the point.
mhm,
How do you,
that feels bad.
it really does, right?
That just feels really bad. That feels like I'm not being seen. Someone is not hearing me, because it's a both and situation. While that is true, my experience was one of deep trauma and pain. And so I guess that experience has really helped me with much smaller things, such as when Jade is deeply pained by one of us raising our voices.
Right.
You, me, Hunter, Maverick, we're way less sensitive to raised voices than Jade is. But I'm not going to look at her and say, toughen up, or this is no big deal, right?
Is it helpful to you to go to a place where you were misunderstood or you felt like there wasn't empathy in terms of respecting your situation? Does that help you kind of show up differently for Jade or for Hunter or Maverick or for me?
I mean, that's what Brene Brown would say you're supposed to do, I believe. I don't know that I do that directly, but I do think that I've had enough practice now that I can recognize, like, ooh, I'm looking at this through my lens. I need to start accepting that I don't know what the other person is feeling. And that if Jade tells me that raising my voice deeply disrupts her, which she can tell me with her words or her actions, I need to believe that.
Right.
Like, for my own heart, because I know that I have idiosyncrasies also that I really want the rest of you to believe when they show up.
Do you think that's the hardest part about what do we call this? Accountability, taking accountability for your actions?
I think it's respect.
Respect?
I think that is really the respect for the individual.
Ah, so it's no longer a boomer term. It becomes respect, meaning I respect your position. I respect
Your experience.
your experience. And what? I'm here for you and
I see you.
and I see you.
And while this particular circumstance may not have brought up, fill in the blank, deep fear, I can empathize with you because I have had other experiences that look different, but that bring up that same emotion within me. And I can use that to relate to you.
Right. And we all have those. So it shouldn't be too hard to reflect on a situation where I have felt misunderstood and bring that back full circle to understand what it feels like to be misunderstood and know, hey, this might not be my experience, but it certainly sounds like it's yours.
M. Scott Peck, in his book, The Road Less Traveled, talks about this term that he uses, bracketing, which is essentially suspending your own existing beliefs and making space for what the other person needs to fill that in with. So putting aside oneself to make room for new information. And I think that is an extremely powerful concept to teach our children as early as possible.
I completely agree. We've had some luck, for lack of a better term, with this already showing up in some of our kids' schools.
Mm-hmm.
Is that
Yeah,
where you want to go?
Absolutely. Let's talk about that. So, Hunter and now Jade go to a local school here. It's called Cocoa Plum Nature School, where the founders have created a framework for repair called heart repair. And so it's based off of the principles of nonviolent communication and conscious discipline, two other wonderful frameworks that have terrible names.
Terrible names.
It's a consistent theme. But essentially, it's a way for kids to make up without having to say, I'm sorry. So I think one of the first and one of the most important aspects of this is that both people have to consent to heart repair. And oftentimes that takes, I won't say at their school, I can tell you in our home, sometimes that's immediate, but more often it takes hours or days. Attachment styles are a whole different topic, but I would just say that like we have Hunter who leans towards an anxious attachment style and wants to repair immediately, whereas Jade, you could call her somewhat avoidant and likes to take more time, just by way of example. So sometimes typically heart repair will be anywhere from 10 minutes to a couple of hours after said incident, depending on what happens. But respecting each individual and having them consent to come to the table, so to speak, to even begin the heart repair process is a very important first step.
Yeah, and I've noticed it's a little anxiety inducing, but once you've done it once or twice, that anxiety kind of goes away and you're more prepared and excited to show up and get it not over with, but actually get into it, as opposed to what I notice with most interpersonal conflicts, even as adults, is we tend to take space from a person, almost too much space, and let it fester and build, as opposed to going to that person and saying, hey, this was my experience and it didn't feel so good.
Right. So we can get into how it happens, but I do just want to say that I think that this really is our job as parents, is to give them the framework, give them the language in a developmentally appropriate, accessible manner, and then they can grow into it over time. Right now, the heart repair is extremely 101, but I do think that now they know, they have a process for making up and making amends and holding one another accountable. That really is a skill that they can build upon as they grow.
Yeah. What is the format
Sure.
that they go through?
So it's the first person will say, I feel, and then insert some emotion.
Right.
Typically for our children, that's sad, mad, scared, but it obviously can be more advanced as you get older.
Yeah.
I have done this with adults before and have had very good results for my own self, peace in my heart. So I feel mad when you steal my monster truck. I need, and then they typically say, you to not do that. Can you please stop? That's usually how it goes, right?
Right.
But then the most important part that for me is when the other person reflects back what they heard. And so it's, you feel sad when I take your monster truck. You need me to stop. And then are you willing to stop? Yes, I am willing to stop. Right. And then sometimes the other person will say, well, I feel really mad when you rip my book. Can you please stop? Right. And so I'm using a little bit of a sassy tone, but sometimes that happens too. But it's this understanding that oftentimes the incident that is the reason to come to the heart repair carpet, if you will, is preceded by many other actions, right? It's built upon. And so there's not blame, but there's accountability on all sides. And so the other person would repeat back, you feel mad when I rip your book. I will stop. Right?
Right.
Relatively simple, but impactful nonetheless.
It's been remarkable just hearing about these interactions happening without our supervision at school, even at Jade's preschool. She took it upon herself, didn't she?
She did, yeah. I'm smiling big because I forgot about that. It's such a great thing. So about 6 months ago, Jade came to me after school one day and said, Mom, my friend keeps yelling at me, stop talking, when the other little girl had been talking for a while and Jade tried to say one thing. But the point is, Jade said, Mommy, it really hurts my feelings, and she says it a lot. And so we talked about, what can you say to her? Let's just call her Sarah. So Jade and I discussed how she would go up to Sarah the next day when things are peaceful, right? And just say, Sarah, when you say stop talking, I feel sad. Can you please stop? And I wasn't there, so I don't know for sure what happened, but I do know that she came home the next day and said, Mom, Sarah heard me and she's not going to do it anymore. And we haven't heard about it again. And she was 4 at the time.
Yeah, it was awesome. Just remarkable. But she's got the scaffolding and she's seen it at home. She's seen it at school. supervised, she knew what to do. And that's really a special framework that our kids have, and we want to share and make sure that it's well known.
Yeah. And I mean, we're just getting started, right? I don't want to make it sound like we have this on lock because we don't.
No.
And there are plenty of times that is an incident in our home and we don't do heart repair. But when we do, it has very strong results.
Yeah. I think that you've mentioned this, the parroting back, the echoing back, what you heard about the other person's experience is the most important thing from heart repair. And it sometimes gets lost in the conversation just because I don't think that kids and adults
It's the hardest part.
It's the hardest part. Really know how to, in the moment, make that feel authentic, and show up as authentic.
But I think it's one of those things where you fake it till you make it,
Yeah.
right? Like I was listening to a Dr. Becky episode the other day, and she was like, we as parents make way too much of an eye roll. I actually think that an eye roll is a positive thing because it's a sign of compromise. These are my words, right? Where it's a sign of compromise where the child is trying to say, I think you're saying something valuable right now, but I need to protect my independence. And so I'm eye rolling as a way to make space from that. And I think you'll get a lot of eye rolling. At least I've witnessed a lot of eye rolling in heart repair, but they're still standing there and the kids are still showing up. And so it's this balance between, I mean, you can't just necessarily jump into full accountability. I think this experience of learning to hold another person's experience in your hand as opposed to pushing it completely away or taking it in and taking it on is a deliberate practice that takes time. I know I'm still working on it, especially with our children. I have a tendency to do one or the other. And so, of course, in heart repair, it is oftentimes challenging to get a child to repeat back what the other has said and to really accept the impact that their behavior has had. But that's what practice is for. It's not always going to go perfectly.
Yeah, exactly. Which is why just having this as a tool in the toolkit, one, and then two, maybe having something documented about that heart repair. So one experiment that comes up for me here is having a family heart repair journal where we just document what the other person's experience was. It's not about what you did to make them feel that way. It's just more that you understand where they're coming from when that experience might not be what you felt, it is what they felt.
I love that. I think that's such a great idea to have some type of ongoing journal, just talking about what really occurrences in our life, conflicts and resolutions, making amends in our home.
Yeah. I just finished reading Esther Wojcicki's How to Raise Successful People. And she always had her daughters, she said, write an apology letter to them. Now, I feel like that's respect, capital R, old school style.
Maybe trending towards that side.
She also threw out that it was a practice of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So I was like,
okay,
take what you want from that. But I do think that to make this a little more modern, a family accountability journal where we write in what the other person's experience was and what we heard, I think would be a really helpful tool.
So who's doing the writing then? I would like to suggest that they do it together.
Sure.
That it's not like the perpetrator has to write what they heard from the victim or something like that.
It's kind of like a guest book at a inn or something. You sign it together. You write, we had this little experience. This little thing happened. This is what we resolved. Sure. And we can write it for them, of course, but we want them to be there and document it with us.
I love that. I think that's an excellent experiment to run. Let's get out a composition book after this.
Sounds good.
All right. So to recap, the most important thing about accountability and respect is that when we expect kids to own their actions and give them the tools to repair, we teach them how to be powerful and stay connected. So as one of the frameworks that I love, it's like a meta framework. So if we have heart repair as a framework, one of the frameworks that I think about a lot is that we have to first give kids the language. Then we can be supportive in their process. And then as they get even older, we really have to be invited in. So this is the time, I think that this is really the most crucial time to support our children with frameworks for interacting, frameworks for courage, like we talked about before, deliberate practice and seeing mistakes as learning opportunities. And then here, framework for accountability. So owning our own mistakes, but using heart repair as a framework, even if you don't come up to a friend and say, hey, it's time for heart repair, right? But actually saying, like Jade did at school, I felt sad when you told me to stop talking repeatedly. Can you please not do that again? Right? That's just she didn't ask for consent to have a whole, like a whole heart repair tete-a-tete, if you will.
Yeah.
But it really is a framework that gave her the language to address her own needs.
Right.
Cool. You have a lot of other things that you want to say on this topic. Let's get into it.
Well, some things to explore.
Okay.
So to lean back, where I noticed that this all broke down, because I had a lot of good modeling of accountability and respect as a younger child, but then where this all broke down for me, I think, was around peer orientation. So when I was exposed to other friends, families, and ways of doing things that I thought were especially funny, cool, laissez-faire, if you will, like letting the kids get into fights or the siblings get into fights and just kind of like throw blows and not apologize, or, take each other's toys and not do anything about it. Just kind of a free-for-all, if you will.
So very different than the way
Very
you grew up.
different from the
Okay.
way that I grew up. And I began to model some of those things, and it was really hard, I would say, to come back to the family orientation for me, especially because one thing that happens when you change your belief system, when I changed my belief system, is that I stopped caring about what we do as a family and cared more about how I got through the uncomfortable, awkward moments just to get to the next thing that I wanted to do. Right.
Can you give us like an age time frame for this?
This is probably 4th or 5th grade and on.
Okay.
So lying to get out of trouble. Right. Even if it wasn't anything necessarily malicious, just like, oh, what movie did you watch at that sleepover?
It starts small, huh?
Start small.
Because what I've heard you say before is that you had a really strong system for accountability and repair in your home when you were little.
Yes.
And that probably relates to the fact that your mom was an early childhood educator.
Yeah.
And she knew how to facilitate those types of interactions. But it sounds like at some point that changed. And it's probably one of the reasons why we're starting this podcast, honestly, at
For
this
sure.
time, to kind of hold on to our kids ahead of that.
Yep.
Because this peer orientation, you haven't talked about it too much on the podcast, but it's something that we've talked about a lot. And I think that is it fair to say you would have preferred to have done it differently? Or that you think of it as part of the demise of your relationship with your parents? Or how do you think about it?
I don't think about it as the demise of the relationship with my parents. I think about it as more of the lost years.
Lost years. That's a much better framework.
Yeah. There was no demise of a relationship. It was just more, we grew apart too early. And then I didn't have them for the years that I thought that I would.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is, to me, something that shows up when I think about our family, is this idea of holding on to our kids. It's not just about keeping them family oriented. It's about not knowing the time that we have together and making sure that the time that we do have together is spent intentionally and with open hearts and vulnerability, not getting by or getting over in order to get what we want selfishly.
Mm-hmm. It feels like at a certain point you kind of embarked on your own journey, separate and apart from your parents, which I think is a necessary part of separating during adolescence. But it felt pretty significant for you.
Yeah. I mean, look, the small town culture of kind of everyone in the same schools, everyone competing for the same things, drives a lot of behavior that I would call helicopter parenting. And helicopter parenting sets a culture of the self. It's a very selfish orientation where I have to be the best at this in order to get on this team. I have to be the best at this in order to be top of my class so that I can get into the best schools. I have to put this on my transcript, whatever. So I have to do this thing for myself. There's no we, there's no service, there's no belief even that the world is any bigger than the town that I grew up in. We have a friend locally in Florida, and she went to private school, but we grew up in the same town. And I notice The same thing about her as with all my other friends that I grew up with who also went to private schools is they were much more family oriented.
Mm.
The reason being, I think, is school districts. When you have school districts around good schools, that's how neighborhoods develop.
Mm-hmm.
People buy houses in order to move into those school districts. We have a friend from New York who moved into a house that I used to play in growing up for the great school district that I was in, right? Like, these are the reasons. We live in Florida where there are no desirable school districts necessarily. It's all about charter schools and private schools. And so people just live wherever they want to live. So Hunter goes to school with a bunch of kids that live all over the place as far as, 30, 40 minutes away. That, I think, is a feature, not a bug, because it allows us to be much more family oriented on the weekends, as opposed to running into the same people that she goes to school with and the same people that she does activities with. It's completely separate.
All right, we are all over the place. What does this have to do with respect and accountability?
That I think we can hold on to our kids a little bit better in this way, but we still have to be mindful of that creep.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing you say is that for you, respect and accountability kind of went by the wayside in your adolescence because you shifted from a family-oriented person to more of a peer-oriented person.
Right.
And we keep saying, hold on to your kids. That is a book that neither of us have read completely.
No.
By Gabor Mate and Gordon Neufeld. That sounds great.
No relation.
Yeah, no, that we know of. But that maybe is an episode for another time.
Yeah.
But it
sounds like it. I mean, a lot shows up there for me. And I think I think you're right, though. And the reason I went off on a tangent is a big reason that we're doing a podcast around this particular topic. One, because it's a topic that we are very passionate about, but why are we passionate about this? We each have different reasons for that. And your reasons versus my reasons are kind of wildly different, but we both arrived at the same conclusion even before we had kids.
Yeah. Can I say a little bit about my reasons too?
By all means.
That's coming up for me today because I am not a peer-oriented person, which is something that we've talked about. However, I did grow up in a suburb, in a neighborhood with a good school district, and I did have a relatively peer-oriented mom. And that community, by no fault of any individual, almost destroyed her and almost destroyed our family because of this keeping up with the Joneses. She had to work when other moms didn't have to work, and we couldn't afford to go on vacations that other people could afford to. And it created a lot of noise that really wasn't focused on our family values and what we wanted. And I think that a lot of the reason why we have started this podcast is because we are finally at a point where we're out of this blocking and tackling up 5 times a night phase of life with the kids, where we actually do have the opportunity to choose. And I think that it would be very easy to ingratiate ourselves into a community where we are trying to keep up with other people and that we are kind of staking our claim in a different direction and saying, no, we are going to cultivate our own family culture based on what our values are, our rhythms, the routines and rituals that we want to have as a family. Then how does the outside world fit in? As opposed to a lot of other noise from the outside world penetrating our family and us trying to find space in between those things for the individuals in our home.
Yep. And we believe we're not alone.
Yeah. I don't think we are. So we're here to say, let's all do it together, right? Just because we're each starting within our family doesn't mean that we are alone, right?
Right.
Your coach likes to say that you and I are on an island. But that's okay, I think, as long as we know that there are other islands out there.
We know for sure that there are.
Yeah. An archipelago, if you will. One
That's
of my
right.
favorite words, right?
That's right. We're like Thailand.
It's or New Jersey.
Or New Jersey.
New Jersey is an archipelago.
It is, I know.
Yeah. Okay. So, yes. Other people on their own islands where we can all be really happy and, create some bridges.
And island hop.
Yeah,
That's right.
Exactly. Cool. Okay.
All right.
Until next time.
Love you, Goosey.
Love you, Goosey.
All right.
Hey guys, if you're still here, you're definitely our kind of person. Thanks for spending this time with us on the most important thing. If this episode resonated with you, we'd love for you to follow us wherever you get your podcasts and share it with someone else building family culture on purpose.